Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone watching. I'm your host, the Report of the Week, and to get straight into things, this is going to be a more serious video. On this channel, of course, I do a bit of everything. I have some videos where, I could be quite silly and, it's pretty funny, but there's others where I try to be very down to earth and very serious. And this is one of those videos. It's something that's kind of been, I guess, bouncing around in my head, so to speak, for a while. But an instance today kind of, I guess, gave me that motivation to go ahead with this. Where last night, I was, we all have our dreams, and we have good dreams, and we have bad dreams. Sometimes we just have crazy dreams, and we have, dreams that are just that are just indescribably incredible. And last night I had a very bad dream, I had a very bad one. I don't even want to talk about it in detail, but when I woke up and it was kind of brought back to my memory, it felt so real, that I was almost in a state, because it felt like this absolutely terrible, horrible thing had happened. Even though it was really a dream, it was kind of implanted in my mind as though it were an actual memory that actually occurred. And that bothered me for quite a long time today. And it gave me some really bad anxiety and fear. And it kind of, one thing really led to another, and I was reminded of a radio lecture that I gave a few weeks ago about support systems. And I decided I want to do that for my next video. Make a video talking about it, discuss it, and kind of give at least my idea of it to a broader audience. Now, first and foremost, I want to say this. I'm not going to be like some television pitchman and say that this is going to work for you, that this is, foolproof and it's going to work for everyone. And this is merely what's worked for me. I say that from my personal experience. But one thing that we have to remember, everyone's different. And sometimes certain things work better for other people. But I'm going to cover that a little later in this video. Mental health is one of those things that even to this day people are so touchy about. And it's even still so stigmatized. It's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. It's something that a lot of people don't feel comfortable talking about. And I think it's very saddening. It's very saddening that even in this day and age, there's still a certain stigma around it. And some people either just lack of knowledge of it, or just scared to talk about it, or scared to do anything about it. And that's so saddening to me. But there's one thing I want to get off the bat right away. When people hear the terms, you're depressed, you have anxiety, you are dealing with this or that, a lot of people make generalizations about it, right? One thing that we have to remember when it comes down to issues is that there are different types of issues, different levels of issues. Every person is different, and these things will affect everyone differently and have different levels of severity. Anxiety, for instance. Well, you could have social anxiety, where you can be scared of large crowds and you could be intimidated of other people. You could have anxiety before a test or a job interview or a business meeting. You can have just generalized anxiety, where you could feel so terrible for really no discernible reason. You could have anxiety so severe you don't even want to leave your own house. You're so scared to even go outside. There's so many different levels of anxiety. Even though it's just such a broad term, it encompasses so many different things. And when someone says that they're suffering from anxiety, we can't just assume immediately, well, they're just a little stressed out and that's it. Because that's not true. Same thing when it comes to depression. You could be having a bad day, But just because someone's depressed doesn't just mean, oh, they just have a little case of the blues and they'll get over it. They'll toughen up. They'll be fine. Sometimes it might just be having a bad day. Could have done bad on a test or an assignment or had a bad day at the job. But sometimes it could be due to personal loss, could be clinical, could be something that's just an everyday reality for someone that seems so ceaseless. So we can never just assume that because someone has some certain thing, that it's affecting them in only one way. Because these are such broad things that have such different levels of severity. It's just a case-by-case basis, and that needs to be understood first. Everyone's different. These types of things affect everyone differently. That I first wanted to kind of clear out, because I think a lot of people, some may be very ignorant to it, but they just may hear those terms and they may just think, well, it just means this one thing and that's it. But that's not true at all. As a matter of fact, I myself, I have my good days. I have my bad days. For me, it can be a mix. Some days I can be very, very stressed out. Some days I could be absolutely terrified. I could be feeling really down. There's other days where I might look like I'm down, but I could actually be feeling very happy inside. Sometimes appearance isn't everything. That too needs to be understood. We all have our good days and our bad days, but these certain types of things affect everyone differently. And, you have your ups, your downs, and everything in between. At least I certainly do. But one important thing when it comes down to dealing with these issues and many more, I realize, is having a support system or a support network in place. Now, that's something that's helped me out greatly. I'll be quite honest with you. When we think of a support system, I mean, especially in terms of how someone is doing physically or mentally, I mean, what's the first thing that we think of, right? We think of a doctor. We think of a nurse. We think of being on meds, being in the hospital, getting hospitalized, going to a group meeting, or being in a group home, or counseling, or one way or another. And there are times where absolutely that is a necessity, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some people, they kind of make that like a joke. They stigmatize it. They make that seem as though it's something you should be ashamed of, that you have to go to the doctor or to the hospital or seek counseling. And they have such a negative stigma against that, which is just sickening that even exists today, but that's just how things sadly are. But there's nothing wrong with having that as a support system. But one thing we must also realize, again, at least from my own personal experience, is that a support system doesn't just need to be a medical, professional. It doesn't just need to be medication. Yes, there are times when that's what it does need to be, but not always. In my opinion, a support system can really, it could be anything depending on the person. And this is just my 2 cents. This is just what works for me. It just is something that kind of gives you that motivation, gives you that strength, gives you that inspiration, that courage, that morale to battle through and fight through whatever plagues you, whatever you're dealing with, whatever you're going through on that day. That gives you that strength to go through it, to fight through it to the best of your abilities. Listen, some days we're not always going to win, and that's okay. But to fight through it the best of our abilities, and to just keep us motivated and keep us going. That to me is what a support system is. That supports you, that keeps you going, that gives you that drive, that morale. Something in some cases to live for, something to keep going for. And that, as I said, can be anything. Can be your parents. That could be a sibling. That could be your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife. It could be a doctor. Could be a teacher or counselor or minister. Could be anyone. And in some cases, it doesn't even need to be a person. It can be music. Sometimes listening to certain songs is a way of kind of being able to express yourself and be able to get those thoughts out and kind of get a sense of contentment and peace and serenity. Sometimes a journal can be a support system to simply write down your thoughts, get them out there on paper. I'll be honest, I've established a journal and I'll sometimes write my thoughts down, and that can just help me in some ways. Or getting them out of my head, where sometimes they can just stew and, instead get them on paper. That's a way to clear them out, and it could sometimes make things better too. Sometimes it could be anything. It could be radio, could be just anything on the computer, could be certain games. As I said, everyone's different. Certain things affect people differently. A support system, though, to me, is just something unique to the individual that gives them that motivation to just keep on keeping on, as I say. And for me, that's a loved one. It really, really helps me. And some ways of support when you're having a bad day. Now, that could be anything. As I said, the two examples that I brought up in the beginning of this video were anxiety and depression, but it could be anything. Such a broad characteristic when it comes down to one's temperament and mental health and how things are going for them. But one thing that I also find is greatly underestimated is the simple power of conversation. Sometimes, when someone might be going through something or having a bad day, you might think, maybe they need this, or maybe they need that. But I say this from my own experience when sometimes I'm going through a rough patch. Sometimes a very, very simple but important thing is just conversation. Sometimes you just need to talk. And that's it. Just talk. We don't need money. We don't need any sorts of other assistance. We just need to talk. Just someone to vent to. Someone to get our thoughts that might just be circulating around in our brain and just share them with another person. Sometimes that power of conversation can be so incredible. Don't even realize it, but sometimes, I say this from personal experience, the power of conversation with another individual can do so much help. It's unbelievable. As I said earlier, I had that terrible dream, and I was in a state because it was such an awful situation, and it felt so real to me. That's how dreams can be sometimes. But that simple power of conversation, talking about it, getting those thoughts out there, it helped. It helped me. Not even 2-3 hours ago, there it was, almost catatonic. It was that bad. But the power of conversation, it can do absolute wonders. As I said, when it comes down to support means and support networks and what works best for different people, it varies. But these are just a few thoughts on my mind. Maybe it's not one coherent point and just a series of miscellaneous points, but I wanted to raise them with you. I wanted to bring them up. I think it's something that not enough awareness is brought to, not enough focus is given to this, because it's still so stigmatized in so many ways. You shouldn't talk about that. If you do, if you deal with this, you'll be deemed a failure. Forget about that. Something that I feel should be brought to much greater light, and there's no shame in discussing it. There's no shame if this is something that you suffer from. No shame in it. And these are just the ways that have kind of helped me, get through some of my bad days in that sense. On one final note, you might have people in your life. They might be friends or family. Might be your boyfriend, your girlfriend. You might be married to them. They might tell you, I'll be there to support you. I'll be there to help you through thick and thin and all of that. And sometimes they may say that, but they might not be there for you, really. It might just be words. And in reality, they may not be there to support you. And if that happens, if that ever happens to you, do not blame yourself for that. Never, ever, ever blame yourself if that ever happens to you. Don't ever feel weak. Don't ever feel like you did wrong, because you didn't. That's not your fault. Never was, never is. Never forget that. A few words I wanted to share with you about mental health, support thereof, and my views on support systems. I hope this was able to provide some assistance and insight to at least someone. As I said, this was just something that I was going through pretty recently, and it kind of gave me that motivation to turn on the camera, set up, and share a few pieces of feedback with you. Hope this was able to help. If anything, I hope it was able to give you some insight. Again, I can't say that this would work for everyone, but I can say that it worked for me, and it's helped me out tremendously. Most certainly has. On a final note, I know I give a plug for this in every single video, but it's important to me, and it's a way, if no one knew about it, it's a way of just getting the word out. If you're interested, you could check out the VORW radio show. It's 1 hour a week that I do, but it's a place where I get up to the microphone. It's like a podcast, really, and I'll kind of talk about more serious topics like this sometimes, and I'll play some music, and it's just an insightful hour of perspective, I'd call it. But you could find it on SoundCloud, you could find it on TuneIn. If you listen to Shortwave, you could hear it there as well. But it's something I do every week, and you could find more information about it in the description and at the end of this video. Thank you for watching. I'm your host, the Report of the Week, and that's all that I have for you. Thank you again, and take care.